Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this portion of the Elevate event where we're looking at connecting building design and manufacturing workflows. So hopefully you can see everything with the webcam here, but we do want to introduce ourselves just a little bit. Adrianna, I'll let you go first.
Thanks. My name is Adrianna Schnieder. I'm a senior engagement engineer with IMAGINiT. My background is in architectural engineering, went to school for it, did it in industry, moved over to Autodesk in the early 2000s, and then moved to the channel shortly after that to perform training and support and that type of thing. And moved over to being an engagement engineer about 8 years ago to really help clients optimize their technology adoptions.
So that covers the idea of the, looking at how these workflows go together. That's on our building design side. Now for me, I'm on the other end of this. I'm on manufacturing. I've been with IMAGINiT for about 20 years now. On the manufacturing side, supporting manufacturers, doing implementations, training, all of those sorts of things. I really specialize in data management and CAD modeling, and spend a lot of time in special machines and recreational vehicles of all things. So worked a lot of those through the time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the webcam. We're going to get into the main presentation, but we did want to introduce ourselves and say hello. So what we're going to start taking a look at here is this idea, and this was Adrianna. I will blame her for this one. The idea of bringing Revit and Inventor together. So Adrianna, could you kind of explain this graphic a little bit and why you chose it?
Sure. So, these are two very independent programs that are used regularly, Revit on the AEC side of things, Inventor on manufacturing. And Autodesk has really invested their time, money, and energy in putting those two together, having them work together and just be friendly. And they continue to do so to this day, hopefully even further along than that.
Yeah, so to Adrianna's point, that's exactly what we've seen. So we've both been around a long time. We've worked, she's worked on the building side, and I've worked on the manufacturing side. And Adrianna, I think it's safe to say we've seen those just come closer and closer together as this time has gone on. And that integration, the integration between building CAD and manufacturing CAD used to be they were both drawn in AutoCAD. And like Adrianna mentioned, we've got these completely different programs. And how do we bring this information together? So that's part of what we want to begin talking about today is how do we take something from Revit to Inventor, from Inventor to Revit. And the nice thing is, one thing I do like about this graphic is it is circular now. We can kind of move between those two worlds a whole lot better. There's a couple of things we're going to use to move between those worlds. And one of them that we're going to use, and this is more on the idea of transfer and communication, is BIM 360. And so this kind of BIM 360, it says BIM, so it started on that building information modeling and on that building design side. Adrianna, have you just kind of talk through this a little bit and what we have?
Absolutely. So it does sit on Autodesk Forge. All of your project data is stored within BIM 360 document management. And then you add additional modules based on the different phases of the project to be able to perform different tasks in a very collaborative and cloud-based environment. One of the nice things is it is expanding past just Revit into the other Autodesk tools and technologies, so that we can not only integrate and streamline our collaboration within the design process and the building design team, but outside of that as well, including civil, plant, advanced steel, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so what this is going to be, this is part of the tool that we're going to use to bring this together. And we'll talk about, I'll explain this a little bit. You don't have to use these tools, but I want to point out that BIM 360 is this document management system that's sitting out there. It's used a lot by building design. However, we can work with that within the manufacturing side with Autodesk Vault, and we can tie these together in a pretty smart way. Again, I'll say it, you don't have to do it like this, but you definitely can, where I can log into Vault. These things are automatically pushed to BIM 360 because of how we can link some of that together. And I'm going to point some of that out, but I just wanted to call that out that there are ways that we can access it.
And I just wanted to add on to that that is an investment that Autodesk is making for everyone throughout the entire life cycle of a project. And I want to continue reiterating that. It's not just about building design or manufacturing. It's about combining all of those together throughout the full life cycle of that project.
So BIM 360 would be one way that we can communicate this. We can tie it into Vault. But now I want to start taking a look at the actual tools we'll be using. So on my end, it's going to be Inventor and specifically AnyCAD. Now, AnyCAD isn't a tool that I have within Inventor. It's not a button I can hit. It's just one of the part of the functionality of it overall and how we can access that. So I'm going to be able to leverage directly the the Revit information inside of Inventor, and I can bring that in. We can do this with a lot of things, as I'm pointing out here, SolidWorks. We can bring in NX information, step files, and I'll point out just a few different things about that. But this is one of the key things. The AnyCAD and being able to access that and bring it in is going to become pretty important. So this is kind of the scenario that we were looking at. When Adrianna and I were looking at this, we said, well, gosh, how would this be used? How would this actually come to life? So Adrianna, have you kind of go through your design requests that you send over to me?
Sure. So as an architect, I've added some cabinetry, some millwork to the dental office I'm working with. And I wanted to reach out to Caleb and get that customized from an object perspective, from materials. And so communication now is extremely important. And we have the ability to be able to utilize the Autodesk tool set to be able to communicate. But on top of that, obviously, be able to use the typical tools that you use on a daily basis, like just email.
So the idea is that I receive this email and she's saying, hey, here we go. Here's a view that I have of it. We can take a look at it. And I said, you know what though? I'll tell you this. Why don't you send me I can pull dimensions off the link you sent, but what about the whole Revit model? I can import that Revit model. Why don't you email that to me? And this is where we get into this other idea.
So really, BIM 360 is that collaborative tool that now allows us to be able to work between all different disciplines. So I was able to give Caleb access to the BIM 360 site that I've been using throughout the entire design process. I also was working with our civil team earlier on, more so during conceptual and planning stages. So I've been able to store all of those files and work collaboratively within that cloud environment using BIM 360. And now moving more towards that construction phase, we have the ability to have Caleb access that even though he isn't working within a Revit environment.
Yeah, so I'm able to get into the BIM 360 site and pull that information down. Now we don't have an email chain going back and forth. We've got a single location. Again, I'll stress, you don't have to do it with BIM 360, but man, is it going to make life a little easier here in a little bit. So what are we actually going to do? And I want to just kind of talk through the workflow of what's happening here a little bit and kind of the path that we're seeing as this goes along. And then we'll get into the software and taking a look at a little bit of how this works within the software once we get to that point. But for right now, here's the idea. We're starting out on the Revit side. There's a Revit model that's been created. That gets uploaded to BIM 360. On my side, I can sync that up with my Vault, import it into AnyCAD, create the geometry, export my Revit information, push it back into Vault where it gets uploaded to BIM 360 and ultimately ends up back in Revit. So we can, this full circle, we can go through here to see all of this information and how this is going to go through. And we're going to show a little bit of both sides of this, how this comes together, and how this is going to work overall. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to have you bring up your Revit, if you would, just show the information that we have in there, and then I'll jump into it in Inventor.
Okay. So here I have a 3D view of some of the workspaces within that dental office. This is where I was able to export a shared view so that Caleb could look at it. So dental office 3D, share that. And then this is shared to a website that can be accessed by Caleb. I can even add some notes or some graphical representation to show exactly what it is that I'm looking for so that he can let me know whether or not it's something that he can do. Also, I have the ability to collaborate this through the cloud network and save this to that BIM 360. So everything is located together within that cloud environment.
Great. So once she's done that, and that's been uploaded to the cloud, and that's where the information gets pushed to, I'm going to pull here on my side. Oh, you pulling up the view that we have there? Yeah. Go ahead.
Nope, that's good. I was about to. There we go. So now here I have the ability to, he can go ahead and measure. I can go ahead and make markups if I wanted to show exactly what it is that I'm looking for, save this out, add some text if I wanted to as well, to be able to share that off to Caleb.
So now I'm going to pick it up on my side here. So I'm going to show my screen again. I'm going to pull up my inventor. It's actually my phone. Let's grab my inventor. So I'm going to pull up my inventor and I'm going to go get that information. So I've downloaded it now. You can see I'm in my downloads folder. I've downloaded it from BIM 360. I'm going to kind of start from here and pull this in. This is where I'm using AnyCAD that I talked about. I'm looking directly at that RVT file that she had. This is the information that we saw just a moment ago. And I'm going to pull this up. Now, a couple of things I'll point out when I do. Again, AnyCAD's the underlying technology. There's nothing, no buttons I have to hit or anything to make this an AnyCAD file. But once I've got to this point, I've got two options. I can convert this model to an inventor file. And you might think you want to, but you don't. What you want to do is reference this in. So I'm referencing it. I'm actually linking to it. This is nice because if she made a change on her end, I could just download that right into my inventor. That link is there. So if there's a link in the BIM 360 that changes and updates, I can have that. And because it links here, I've got it automatically. I'm going to go to my enlarged plan here, which is the view that she had just a moment ago. And I can see I've got a preview. I can turn things off, turn things on. I'm going to bring in just exactly what she had as part of that. And again, I'm referencing that model. This comes into my inventor assembly as a reference. This becomes just a component that I have in here and I can begin working with. So now we'll bring this in and I've got access to all of the information that was in there. So it comes up here within, I've got the information, it comes up right within my inventor. Everything that she had on her end shows up right over here, right down the list. I've actually got access to each component that I have in here, all of the information. So I could begin turning off the things that I don't really need on mine. On my end, I'm just worried about these cabinets. I'm going to say, well, I don't need these floors. I'm not going to need this curtain wall information that I have over here. Don't need those panels. Right, so I can adjust all of it. And now what's interesting is I'm down to my specialty equipment. I can get down to individual components that are in here. So what I'll do is I'm going to just pick one of them. And all of this, you see, it goes right back. It's got all of my Revit codes, my Revit information, just like we would expect. And I'm going to go ahead and isolate just this one. So I'm bringing in all that information, and now I've brought it down and isolated just a single component that I want to work with. Well, what can I do with it? I brought it across here. I've got this Revit information that I brought into this point, but now I can't really do anything. I can't edit this. I don't have a history of it, which makes sense. In Revit, there's not as nearly the information in Revit that I want on my end. I want to begin dealing with manufacturing this. So a Revit family is designed very differently than I would design this for manufacturing. But what I can do is I can use this as the basis for creating the information that I want. Let's take a look at that just for a second. I'm going to steal some information off of it, and we'll kind of walk through and do this in a couple of different ways. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new part. And I'm creating it in context. So I've got my existing information from Revit right there. I have access to all of that. So when I begin sketching, when I begin working with this, I can come along and use that just like I would any other geometry that I typically have within CAD. So I'm going to come over here. It doesn't matter if it's AutoCAD, it doesn't matter if it's Inventor. I can project it just like that. So this came from Revit. I'm just going to go grab that information and I can borrow it. Sounds good. That's the exact sketch I want. That's the shape. We're going to begin working with that. Yeah, I might have to make a few changes here and there, but as a general idea, that's what I'm going to go with. Now I can determine a distance on that. So I could go to, and I'm just going to drop it down to that next level down there. So everything that I'm creating is based directly off the Revit geometry that we have in place. So if something were designed, if there were a family concept, if there were a mass, any of that is put in place within, if that's put within Revit, I can use that now over here on my side to begin manipulating through this and seeing some of these different pieces. And I'm just going to walk through a few pieces on this so that we get an idea of how this might go. So, hey, that piece looks good. I'm going to go ahead and begin creating some of the other components on here. Again, I've got this idea of create, and I'm going to just do a side panel. And I can begin building that. Now, I can do this as individual parts. I could do this as multi-body components. I've got a range of ways that I could begin working with it. In my case, I'll just take the information that I have. Again, I can project the geometry coming right out of Revit, and I'll extrude it across. So we'll take it over here to the next side. Make sure I'm getting my right side. Yep. And I'll take it down. So I can extrude it through, go to where I want it to go to. And then once I've got it, I'll be able to begin extracting those parts as manufacturable components. Because at this point, they're going to have the inventor information. They're going to have all of the things that I typically need for that to work. I'll just take it right over there. There's my first side panel. So now, instead of just having this Revit information here, I'm beginning to overlay my components on top. And of course, I wouldn't finish here. I'm going to have to come in. I've got hinges. I've got all of this different information that I would want to begin to put into place. But for a skeleton, I can begin right off of that and steal it from there. Now, I've got another variation of this I'm going to work with. This is more of a completed version of something like that, where I've gone through and I've taken some sides and I took a countertop and some of the drawer faces and all of those. Then I've gone through and begun to add in my own components and my own information. So I'm going to turn off the visibility of the front here. I'm just going to make this transparent, and we'll do the same thing on the side here so I can see through. So in this case, I took that same idea, extracted the countertop, extracted the sides, but then I began to put in my drawer slides, my pulls, all of my hardware that I needed so that we've got that locked in place where it needs to be. All of the information is now in here. So this becomes a model that I can now take into a variety of different ways. I can begin placing drawings off of this. I'm going to go ahead and open up this component, and we've now got it within here. Begin creating a drawing off of it. And this may be where I would want to go. Where I want to create construction, I want to create my manufacturing drawings off of it. So we've gone at this point from Revit as this overall model with these ideas laid out, bringing it in here to a 2D drawing based off of that, borrowing the information, the locations, the sizes, the dimensions, and we've gone all the way down the line to get to that point. This is the idea of where that goes. I'm actually going to jump back to my PowerPoint just for a second because I want to talk about some other deeper things that we could do with that. In my case, I've gone through and I've got this set up and I've got some of this information in place, but we could begin taking that and taking it into inventor nesting so that I could lay out on a particular sheet how all those different pieces that I would have so that I can cut them out. Right? So this is getting further away from the building side, which I want to return to in a moment, but I do want to point this out. It's not just the CAD side and creating the drawings and the information we would have that way. It's creating all of this using the nesting tools that we have so we could extract some of that information. taking it into CAM so that I could begin generating tool paths and building off of that. All of these tools work within the inventor environment and work around the inventor environment so that we can take this model that was generated in Revit all the way down to these individual drawings, these individual cut lists, all those components that I have. So I just wanted to point that out, that that's part of the idea of where we're heading with this. But I do want to go back and take a look at the idea of taking this a little bit further. So a couple of things that I can do here, and I'm going to turn off my transparency on my items that I have. A couple of things that I can do. One, I could save this out as a Revit family. So I mentioned, there was the idea that it started as a Revit family. I said those words, and that's kind of a collection of items within Revit. It could be doors are a Revit family, windows are a Revit family. Casework like this is a Revit family. And I have the ability to send this right back as a Revit family. So that's something that I can begin working with, and I can bring that information in. So let's talk about the Revit family here just for a moment. I have an environment within here called BIM content that I can go access, and I can go begin setting my inventor information up as BIM content. One of the most common things I'm going to do before I get too far is I'm going to set up my UCS for this. A lot of times the UCS that we would have within Inventor and the UCS that we would have within Revit are going to be two very different things. It's just the nature of those two different softwares and how they work. But a lot of times what I want to do is bring this in here and establish it so that I've got it set up the way that I want it to. I've got my 0, point set up where I'd want it to, and I can locate this off of geometry, but I just want to have something like that in place. Say, okay, so I got. Now this should be able to come into Revit with a 0 point where I would want it, and we have that information. I can go a little further and I can say I want to author building components. So what this means is I can take this information, I'll give it a location point right here. Sounds good. And I can bring this information in. I can give it a description. I can give it a manufacturer. Give it a model number. I will not include a URL. And then if I wanted to, I can go take a look at other properties that I want to bring in. These could be properties directly from my inventor model that's already out there. I can go select all of these different properties that are part of this and all this information, pull that in so that it becomes part of my model. In my case, I'm good. I'm just going to go with what I have. This is the information in building information modeling. This is the type of thing that's going to show up on the other side so that we have, when we're working with that model, we've got it, we can query it, we can put it into schedules, all of those different things. I'm just going to go ahead and apply that. And I'm going to say export building components and get a warning when I do. It says, well, this is pretty complex, right? This is probably not what you want right now. Do you want to simplify it? And the reason it's telling me, it's asking me if I want to simplify it, and I'm just going to cancel this just for a moment. Yeah, I've got 112 components here representing this single base cabinet that I have right here. There's no way I want to send 112 of these components over to Revit to be used within there. So what I'm going to do is use the simplify command. And the simplify command goes through, fills up internal voids, removes internal parts, uses the color overrides. Basically, it's going to take this information that I have and simplify it down very easily and quickly here so that it becomes a more usable within Revit. And this is something that we've seen through time that's been kind of difficult to work with in terms of, how do we want to set this up and where do we want this to go? Now I'm going to have a simplified version of this that I have in place. So this is actually just one component now. I don't have all of the information. You'll notice that my casters down here at the bottom suddenly just become pegs. My drawer pulls just become rectangles. I've lost the bowl nose that I had on the front of my countertop there. All of that has just become very basic, simplified information. And this is the type of thing that I can now export out to Revit so that I've got the information that I need. So I actually have another one set up for Adrianna here in a moment, but I just wanted to point that out, that I can export that out that way, and then we can work with that within there. However, I did mention there were a couple of ways I could do this. Dealing with this base cabinet that I have here, that's exactly what I would want to do. I would want to send this out as a Revit family. You know, I brought it in, we've got the information. I want to go ahead and send that out as a Revit family. We do have one more option, and that is the idea of exporting something out, not as a Revit family, but I can export it out as a Revit file. So here, if I take a look at export, I can simply save this as an RVT. This becomes a Revit file that could then be appended into Revit on the other end. Where we would typically see that wouldn't be with a single unit like this, it would more be with a system. So whether it's a work cell system within a factory, or maybe I furnished an entire room, anything like that, that's where we could then save out a Revit file. Instead of a single unit, we're saving out an assembly, the way I think of it in my mind. The thing I would want to point out is when I go to save it out as a Revit file, guess what? I'm right back in my simplify command we saw earlier, so that we can take this down and we're not sending out these really, really complex models and all this complex information that we would have with that. All of this, of course, I've got my vault kind of overarching over all of it, so I can go check this information into my vault. I've got my vault set up to sync to BIM 360, so that can push that information directly back to Adrianna, where she can pull it down and begin working with it on her side. So Adrianna, I'm going to skip right back to you.
Sounds great.
Make you the presenter, and we can take a look at that on the other end.
Wonderful, thank you. So I brought in Caleb's wonderful cabinet, excuse me, and I wanted to just show a couple of things because of the information that Caleb actually entered in. That's all brought over to the Revit family itself. In addition to that, we do have the fact that it's casework. We brought in the Omni class information. So there is things other than just geometry that go ahead and come over. Moving over back to our enlarged plan, I can certainly load this. I'm going to go ahead and load this into the project. Oh, actually selected. Here we go. I can load that into the project and go ahead and place it exactly where I need it to go. Looking back at my enlarged plan here. So now I have his actual casework with his specifics, and now I can modify the information that I need so that I can bring on the materials, perform some renderings, but it is the correct custom part that I needed.
So now that we've round tripped this and we've gone all the way around, I'm sure this generates some questions or some ideas, and we want to open it up to answer a few of those now.